I never thought I'd star in one of those entitled neighbor stories, but here we are. I'm Marcus, a 36-year-old software engineer who purchased my first home in Oak Ridge Estates last year. The neighborhood seemed perfect. Quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and well-maintained properties. Everything was great until I met Patricia Holloway, the self-appointed dictator of our homeowners association, or as I'll spell it out, HOA. My house came with a custom mailbox. Nothing outrageous, just a navy blue box with brass accents on a wooden post. It was sturdy, functional, and I quite liked it. About 2 months after moving in, I received my first HOA notice about mailbox non-compliance. According to the massive rulebook I was given, all mailboxes had to be the standard black metal variety. The letter was signed by Patricia Holloway, HOA president, with a handwritten note demanding compliance within 30 days. I had more pressing home improvements to worry about, so I set the letter aside. The mailbox worked perfectly fine and changing it wasn't a priority. When the deadline passed, another letter arrived with a $50 fine. A week later, Patricia herself appeared at my door. She was exactly what you'd expect. Perfectly highlighted blonde hair, designer sunglasses, pressed khakis, and an HOA logoed polo shirt. She clutched her clipboard like a weapon. "Hello, I'm Patricia Holloway, president of Oak Ridge Estates HOA, she announced with a tight smile. "I'm here about your mailbox situation." I explained that I planned to replace it eventually but had been busy with more important projects. Her smile vanished. "The rules aren't suggestions," she said sharply. "They're requirements. Your mailbox is not only non-compliant but an eyesore that affects everyone's property values. Fines will continue to accumulate until you comply." Despite my irritation at her tone, I kept my cool. "I understand. I'll take care of it when I can." Over the next few weeks, $50 fine notices arrived like clockwork. I intended to replace the mailbox eventually, but something about Patricia's attitude made me want to procrastinate. I know, not the most mature response, but her condescension had struck a nerve. One Saturday morning, about 6 weeks after our encounter, I was working by my front window when I spotted Patricia marching up my driveway with 2 men. One carried a standard black mailbox, and the other had a shovel and cement. I rushed outside. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" Patricia turned, looking smugly triumphant. "Since you've failed to comply despite multiple notices, the board voted to remedy the situation ourselves. Section 12.2 of the bylaws gives us this authority. You'll be billed for materials and labor, of course, in addition to your outstanding fines." I kept my voice level. "You can't remove my property without permission. That's not legal." She laughed dismissively. "Actually, I can. You agreed to the HOA rules when you purchased this home. After 45 days of non-compliance, we can take corrective action. You should have read the documentation more carefully." She gestured to the men. "Continue, please." "Stop right now," I said firmly. "I do not consent to this. If you continue, I'll call the police and report this as vandalism." Patricia rolled her eyes. "Go ahead. The police won't intervene in HOA matters. They'll tell you it's a civil issue." I pulled out my phone and began recording. "I'm documenting this in case there's any confusion later." This visibly irritated her. "Put that away. You don't have my permission to film me. We're on my property, and I'm documenting what I believe is illegal activity. I don't need your permission." The workers looked uncomfortable, glancing at each other nervously. I decided to try a different approach. "Guys, I understand you're just doing your job, but removing my mailbox without consent could get you in trouble too. I'm not angry with you, but I am going to report this." The older worker straightened up. "Ma'am, maybe we should come back another time, if he's going to make this a legal issue." While they argued, I quickly searched tampering with mailbox, federal offense on my phone. What I found made me smile. "Patricia, did you know that mailboxes are considered federal property? Damaging or removing them without authorization is actually a federal offense under United States Code Title 18, Section 1725. It can result in fines up to $250,000 or up to 3 years in prison." She scoffed. "That's ridiculous. That law is about mail theft, not HOA compliance. You can't make up legal nonsense to avoid following the rules. I turned my phone screen toward her. I'm not making anything up. Feel free to read it yourself. Or we can call the postal inspector right now and ask them directly. For the first time, Patricia looked uncertain. The workers exchanged glances, and the older one put down his shovel. "Ma'am, I don't want any part of federal charges." "This is absurd," Patricia sputtered. "The HOA has authority over all exterior fixtures." "The HOA may have rules about appearance," I explained calmly, "but they don't supersede federal law. You can fine me, but you cannot legally remove or damage the mailbox yourself." The workers started packing up their tools. Patricia's face turned an alarming shade of red. "This isn't over. The board will be discussing your continued defiance and all legal options available to us." With that, she stormed back to her pristine white SUV. That evening I ordered a standard black mailbox online, not because I was giving in, but because I wanted to defuse the situation. However, I decided to wait a few days before installing it. I was right to be cautious. 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of metal being wrenched from wood. I rushed to my window just in time to see Patricia yanking my blue mailbox off its post with a crowbar. It was 6:15 in the morning, and she was wearing dark clothes, like some mailbox ninja. I grabbed my phone and ran outside in my pajamas. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, immediately recording. Patricia froze, clearly not expecting to be caught. Then she straightened up, crowbar still in hand. "Enforcing the rules," she said defiantly, though I could see panic in her eyes. My blue mailbox lay on the ground, dented and scratched. "I literally just told you this is a federal offense," I said, keeping my phone pointed at her. "And now I have video evidence of you deliberately damaging federal property." A few neighbors had emerged from their homes, curious about the commotion. Mr. Thompson from across the street stood on his porch in his bathrobe, mouth agape. The Johnsons next door had paused their morning dog walk to stare. Patricia suddenly realized she had an audience. She dropped the crowbar and attempted to regain her composure. "The HOA has the right to—" "No, it doesn't," I interrupted firmly. "What you're doing is illegal and you know it. That's why you're here at 6:15 dressed in black instead of coming during business hours with your clipboard." More neighbors were gathering now. I could hear murmurs and see people pointing. Patricia's confidence was visibly crumbling. "This non-compliant mailbox has been an issue for months," she announced loudly, trying to justify herself to the onlookers. "As HOA president, it's my responsibility to maintain community standards." My next-door neighbor, Dave, a retired attorney, approached us. "Patricia, did you really just destroy this man's mailbox?" "I didn't destroy it," she insisted. "I'm removing it for replacement with an approved model." Dave shook his head. "That's not how this works. The HOA can fine him, take him to court, or place a lien on his property after due process. You can't just vandalize his property." "It's worse than that," I added. "Mailboxes are protected by federal law. Tampering with them is a federal offense." Dave nodded. "He's right about that. I've seen cases like this before." Patricia's face paled. She looked from Dave to me, then at the damaged mailbox. "This is ridiculous. I'm acting on behalf of the HOA board." "Did the board specifically authorize you to personally destroy property at dawn?" I asked, still recording, "because that seems like an unusual board decision." She didn't answer. "This will all be sorted out at the next board meeting. You're still in violation and accumulating fines." She started walking away, leaving the crowbar and damaged mailbox on my lawn. "I'm calling the postal inspector and the police to report this," I called after her. "And I'll be sending them this video." She practically jogged to her car parked a block away. Several neighbors approached me as she drove off, offering support and sharing their own stories about Patricia's tyrannical rule. "She fined me for having the wrong shade of beige curtains visible from the street," Mrs. Chen said, shaking her head. "She measured the height of my grass with a ruler and fined me because it was half an inch too tall," added Mr. Rodriguez from down the street. True to my word, I called the police to report the vandalism and contacted the postal inspector's office, emailing them the video of Patricia destroying my mailbox. I also set up a security camera to cover my front yard. The police took my report and the officer seemed amused but took it seriously. We've had HOA disputes before, but this is a new one, he admitted. She really crossed a line. By that afternoon, I had installed the new black standard mailbox I'd ordered, exactly the kind specified in the HOA guidelines. I figured compliance would strengthen my position. The next day, I received a call from the postal inspector's office. Inspector James Ramirez arrived to take photos and get a formal statement. After examining the damaged mailbox and reviewing my video, he explained they were taking the case quite seriously. Mailbox vandalism might seem minor to some, but it's a federal crime for good reason, he explained. When people start tampering with mailboxes, it undermines mail security, which is essential for privacy and identity protection. That evening I received an emergency HOA email notification. There would be a special board meeting the following night to discuss recent community incidents. All homeowners were encouraged to attend. The community clubhouse was packed to capacity. The 5 HOA board members, including Patricia, sat at a table facing the residents. Patricia looked considerably less confident than usual, her typically perfect appearance slightly disheveled. The vice president, a man named Robert, opened the meeting. Before we address regular agenda items, we need to discuss a serious matter. It has been alleged that an action was taken against a resident's property without proper authorization from the full board. Murmurs spread through the room. Patricia stared straight ahead, her expression stony. The board wants to make it clear that while we are committed to maintaining community standards, we do not condone illegal actions or property destruction, Robert continued. All enforcement must follow proper procedures. Another board member, Janet, spoke up. To be transparent, the board did vote to address the non-compliant mailbox, but our resolution was to proceed with legal notification of intent to place a lien on the property. At no point did we authorize physical removal or destruction of the mailbox. All eyes turned to Patricia. I acted in what I believed were the best interests of our community, she said stiffly. The non-compliance was ongoing, and more direct action seemed necessary. Direct action at 6:15 in the morning? Someone called from the audience, prompting laughter. Robert cleared his throat. The board has received notification that both local police and federal postal inspectors are investigating this incident. This puts the HOA in a potentially liable position. I raised my hand and was recognized to speak. I want to make it clear that my issue isn't with the HOA rules themselves. I've already installed a compliant mailbox. My issue is with Ms. Holloway's approach, which escalated from excessive fines to property destruction. Several residents applauded. Other homeowners stood to share their experiences with Patricia's overzealous enforcement. It seemed she had been targeting certain residents while ignoring violations by her friends and assessing fines without proper board approval. As the testimonies continued, Patricia's face grew increasingly flushed. Finally, she stood abruptly. This is a coordinated attack on my character. I have devoted years to maintaining the standards of this community. She gathered her papers and stormed toward the exit. You'll regret this when property values plummet because of non-compliance. After she left, the board announced they would audit all fines assessed in the past year and, pending the results of that audit and the ongoing investigations, Patricia had been temporarily relieved of her duties as president.